Hey everybody, welcome back. This is our first P5JS video, our first project in both the APCS Principles class as well as the Intro to Comp Sci. And so what we're going to do in this class, or in this project, is we are going to do a little animation. We're going to make something move. Right now, as we've seen before, we've got a canvas that has size 700 by 700. The background is painted black. 2 is a very low number, so that's going to paint a black background, and the fill is 220, 50, 30. We'll explain more about colors later, but this is going to give me a red ball, and the ball's shape is going to be, or the ellipse is going to be a circle because it's going to be, it's going to have a diameter of 30 in the X and a diameter of 30 in the Y. So it's going to be a circle, and then its location is going to be at 350, 350. Notice that's half of 700 and half of 700, so it's going to appear right in the middle of the screen. And I think I'm going to say no stroke, and what that's going to do is there's not going to be a line around the outside of the ball. In any case, if I were to run this right now, I should see a ball appear at the center of the screen, and there it is. It's a red ball in the center of a black screen or a black canvas. So now what I want to do is introduce a new idea. We are going to use the concept of a variable. Incidentally, if I put 2 slashes like that, this is a comment. And so basically that tells the computer to ignore this. Comments are for people to read, not the computer. And I'm going to say declare variables, because that's what I'm going to do here. And this is going to remind me later on what this was about. It's also going to help other people read my code more easily. Okay, so I'm going to create a variable. To do that, you use the 3 letters var. And I'm going to have 2 variables, loc x and loc y. And I don't have to say what kind of variables they are. Those are just little containers. I name them so I can use them. Variables are going to contain values that can vary during the run of the program. So first of all, I declare them, and then I'm going to give them a value. So go ahead and say down here, I'll say initialize. I'll just say init for short, init my variables. And that means give them an initial value. And so I've got this variable loc x, and so I can just say loc x, and that's equal to, let's start that off at 350. And I'm going to do the same thing for loc y. And now we haven't really changed anything because we already had the values 350 in there. But what I can do now is, instead of putting 350 in here, I can say loc x and comma loc y. Now I have the opportunity, if I want to move those values or to vary the values of those 2 variables. So I'm not changing anything now. So right now, everything is running just like it was before, but I'm going to say loc x is equal to loc x plus 1. And now what's going to happen is every time I come into this function, remember draw runs 30 times a second. And every time I come in here, it's going to go ahead and move. Notice that the ball is moving, and it looks like it's creating a line because I'm not redrawing the background. So if I were to take this, remember the setup only runs once. But if I copy this and I put it down here, now every time I come in here, 30 times a second, I'm going to redraw the background. And so now the ball just looks like it's moving to the left. Sorry, to the right. In any case, the idea is that's going to move my ball. Let's do the same thing now for y. Let's say instead of adding, I'm going to say loc y, and I'm going to say loc y again. And I'm going to, let's say, subtract 1. Remember, when I subtract 1, that's going to go up. So now it's moving over, and it's going up. This is changing it. Every time I'm in here, 30 times a second, I'm changing the x value, I'm changing the y value. So when I redraw my ellipse, I'm changing its location. Okay, guys, the next step is to add another variable. And I'm going to add a variable for the speed. That way, every time I run this program, it could move in a different direction. So I could say variable, and I'm going to add speed x. I'm being lazy, and I'm just going to say, instead of writing out the whole word, I'm going to abbreviate that to speed x and speed y. Those are the declarations, and inside the function, since setup is going to be run right when the program starts, I'm going to give these guys values. So I'm going to say speed x is equal to, and I'm going to use a random function. The random function is simply the word random, and I can put in a range of values here. So I'm going to say from -5, 5. Good. And I'll put a semicolon at the end of that, and then that's going to give me a different speed each time I come through here. And so I'll do the same thing for the y value. I'll say speed y, and that's going to give me another random value. So every time I run the program, I get a new random value for the speed. So down here, instead of saying 1 for adding this to the location, I'm going to add speed x. And I cut that, I guess. So let's go back and change that to speed x. Good. And I'm going to do the same thing for speed y. Speed y is going to give me a random value. So now every time I run the program, we'll see the ball moving in different directions. It can move up, it can move down, it can move left, it can move right. And so I have an element of randomness to which way it's going to move off the screen. Now that's really the whole project. The project today was just to get a ball to move off the screen, and that's really done. I'm just going to pay attention to a couple of other things that's going to make our program a little bit slicker. One is that P5 already has some other variables declared. We can't see them because they're declared in the P5 library, but one of them is height and one of them is width. And we can use that in our program. Instead of saying 350, what we can do is we can say width divided by 2. Notice that width turned pink. That means that P5JS recognizes it. It turns out that 700 divided by 2 is 350. So we haven't really made a change. But I could also say the same thing in the y direction for height divided by 2. And that's going to give me, again, it's always going to start in the middle. But the difference is now, when I change this, let's say I change this to 400 by 400. Remember 350 and 350, if I had just left these numbers 350 and 350, it would be appearing down here. But because I put it in terms of the height and the width, now when I run the program, it's still going to happen right, or it's still going to appear right in the center and move off the screen in a random direction. Okay, because we're using random. Let's do one more thing. I'm going to create a variable called color. I'm going to call it CLR for short. Color is another variable, actually that's a function in P5JS, and I'm going to go ahead and say color, which is a variable, is equal to, and I'm going to use the color function, and it's going to return a color object. And so we'll talk more about objects later, but this is a color, and so I just need to give it a random color. And it turns out that colors are made of 3 different values, or one way to represent is to use 3 different values between 0 and 255. And so they're called RGB colors because the first one is for red. So I'm going to get a random number for red between 0 and 255, a random number for green between 0 and 255, and a random number for blue between 0 and 255. And now color is whatever color this returns is going to be loaded into this variable. And so now when I fill, instead of using these 3 numbers, I'm going to use my color variable. And so when I run this, every time I run the program, I'm going to see that I'm going to get a different color ball, and it's going to be one of millions of different choices of possibilities. So that's what I want you guys to do for the first project. Get a single ball to appear, move off the screen. You can use the random, you can copy this code verbatim, but we're just getting used to typing in the syntax and so forth. If you want to go beyond this and play around with some of the other things you can find in the library, have a good time. And that's it for today. Bye-bye.